The mother of a man shot and killed by police responding to a prank 911 call says she still has not seen her son's body. This is the man accused of making that call. It's a practice known as swatting. Set to appear in court today. That just happened. Wichita police, meantime, releasing the call, the 911 call. We have a brief portion of that we're going to play for you. I do want to warn you, some of this you may find disturbing.
Tell me exactly what happened.
They were arguing, and I shot him in the head, and he's not breathing anymore.
Is there any way you can put the gun up?
No. Are you guys sending someone over here? Because then I'm definitely not going to put it away.
Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and stay on the phone with you, okay?
Until they get here, or?
As long as you need me to, okay?
Yeah, I'm thinking about, because I already poured gasoline all over the house. I might just set it on fire.
CNN correspondent Miguel Marquez joining us now on the story from Los Angeles. Miguel, the man who allegedly, we hear on that tape, Tyler Barris, was just in court. What happened there?
Yeah, it is so disturbing to hear that 911 call. The voice that you heard on that call is alleged to be that of 25-year-old Tyler Barris. He is in Los Angeles. He was just in court and waived his right to an extradition hearing here in Los Angeles, which means he can be moved to Wichita to face charges there much more quickly. Wichita officials put in one felony warrant charge of making a false alarm. L.A. officials acted on that at their behest, and Mr. Burris will now be sent back to Wichita to face charges for what he did. Erica?
So he will be sent over to Wichita. What are authorities in Kansas saying happened here?
Yeah, I mean, this is what is so frustrating. So you hear that voice on the 911 call. That, they say, was the voice of Mr. Burris last Thursday, making a call, making it seem like he was calling from inside the house of Andrew Finch, a 28-year-old who later got killed because of that call. A SWAT team went to the house. They walked up on the house. Mr. Finch walked out of the house with his hands up. When he started to put his hands down, a police officer shot and killed Mr. Finch. It is not clear that these two individuals, Finch and Burris, even knew each other. All of this reportedly started over a dispute during an online video game playing. It is shocking and sad on so many accounts, because you have a young man who is dead, and you have a sheriff or a police officer who has mistakenly shot and killed somebody who he thought was a threat. So it is just a very difficult story all around. Erica? It
really is. And then we're hearing from the family of the victim, his mother, very upset with authorities in Kansas. What is happening there?
Look, the family, one, they want access to the body. They say they don't have access to the body of their own son. They were all home when this happened, and they were arrested. They were put in cuffs. They're asking, why isn't the police officer being investigated who shot Mr. Finch? They have a lot of questions for the police force and for the mayor in Wichita. The city and the police department being very cautious as they go forward, because clearly they know things went wrong. They did not have any training for these swatting type situations. Other police departments have dealt with this in the past, but this is a new one for Wichita, so it is going to be I think a long, slow road ahead. Erica?
One we'll be following as well. Miguel, thank you. Miguel Marquez, live for us there in Los Angeles. Okay. Here with us on set in New York, Robert Bianchi, former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. You also have significant experience with law enforcement, we want to point out. So you kind of, have a hat in both of these worlds as we look at it. That 911 call that we heard, allegedly, that is Tyler Barris's voice on that. It is not a quick prank call. It went on for several minutes with seemingly a lot of supposed details. That alone, how does that enter into the investigation and the charges here?
Well, as a prosecutor, I'm going to be very concerned about that phone call because it was very methodical. He pulled all the triggers so that law enforcement is now going out there to this innocent man's home in a very toxic match and gasoline scenario. These cops are gearing up. The tactical patrol is out there. They believe there's a hostage situation. They believe somebody's been killed. They believe that there's been gasoline poured throughout the house. So they are not going there on a dog barking call. They are going there figuring that there may be some carnage or somebody they need to take out. So this is a really bad scenario for cops to be in, and obviously for innocent people. And I have dealt with this. In 2008, it started, where it's actually happened to some vulnerable populations, like the mentally ill facilities or people where there are elderly people, and the cops are showing up there thinking there's a hostage scenario.
So having dealt with that in the past, I mean, how does this work out? Because you can't know at the time that this is a so-called swatting. That 911 call comes in. It is transmitted to authorities. They do exactly what they think they need to do.
Right.
And then on the backside, they realize this was an innocent man.
Yeah, and there's nothing they can do. It's a very bad scenario. The laws have to be increased. The prosecutions have to be more intense. This person should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, but there's nothing really law enforcement can do other than exercise control and restraint.
What is when you say to the full extent of the law, so we know there's a felony charge of false alarm right now is the charge in Kansas. Do you envision charges could be upgraded? Could there be murder or manslaughter charges here?
Manslaughter charges for reckless conduct, and the federal government may get involved because he used the cell phone, and that could implicate some federal charges. But we need laws more specifically designed for this, but they're going to throw the boatload of whatever they got right now.
In terms of having laws more specifically designed for swatting, how much of an issue is it these days? How much has it increased? Do we have a sense even?
There were 400 calls, according to the FBI, last year where this has happened. I know in the county where I'm at, it's happened a couple of times. And once it gets publicized, it's going to happen more and more. So we need more specific laws. And if somebody dies in the course of one of these incidents, it should be treated as an absolute manslaughter case at a minimum, where there could be significant state prison time as opposed to the anemic laws that we currently have right now, Erica.
Bob Bianchi, always good to have you with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So as Bob pointed out, you have to respond to this if you're an officer. What is it like, though, to be that officer responding in a situation like this? Ahead, we'll speak with a former detective. Meantime, Harvey Weinstein, the mother of a man shot and killed by police responding to what turned out to be a prank 911 call, says she still hasn't seen her son's body. This is the man accused of making that call. It's a practice known as swatting. Appears in court. Wichita police releasing that 911 call, rather. We're going to play a brief portion of it for you now. In total, it lasted several minutes. I do want to warn you, you may find some of this disturbing.
Tell me exactly what happened.
They were arguing, and I shot him in the head, and he's not breathing anymore.
Is there any way you can put the gun up?
No. Are you guys sending someone over here? Because then I'm definitely not going to put it away.
Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and stay on the phone with you, okay?
Until they get here, or?
As long as you need me to, okay?
Yeah, I'm thinking about, because I already poured gasoline all over the house. I might just set it on fire.
CNN correspondent Miguel Marquez joining us now on the story from Los Angeles. So that is allegedly the voice of Tyler Barris, who was in court earlier today, Miguel.
Yeah, it is disturbing to hear that voice because he says it with such dispassion, and there seems to be no connection to what he's actually calling in. So that the person whose voice you just heard is 25-year-old Tyler Barris, say officials. He was just in court here in Los Angeles. He was fidgety while he was in court, wearing a black hoodie. When the judge asked if he was going to waive his rights to an extradition hearing to go back to Wichita, Kansas to face charges for swatting, he shouted out, "Waive, waive," and that was it. So the good news, if there's any here, that will speed his removal from Los Angeles back to Wichita so that he can face charges there. The Wichita officials only filed a single charge of making a false claim, which LA authorities acted on, arrested him last week, the day after that alleged call happened.
So
Erica?
Miguel, when that call happened, because as you point out, very dispassionate in the voice on that recording, what are authorities saying happened, when they arrived at the home?
Yeah. With the reporting, what authorities are saying is it appears that this was an argument that started during an online video game play, that Mr. Barris was here in Los Angeles. He made a call to Wichita, Kansas, making it seem like he was calling from the home of Andrew Finch. He is the 28-year-old that when the SWAT team in Wichita responded, he came out with his hands up. And when he started to put him down, a police officer then shot and killed Mr. Finch. And that's why we bring ourselves to today, Mr. Barris now facing at least one charge of making a false claim, but probably many more serious charges in the weeks ahead. Erica?
Certainly, yeah, and that is expected many more to come. Also, there's the matter of the victim's family, and there are some issues there. They are not happy with the way things are being handled. What are they saying?
They say, look, that Mr. Finch doesn't play video games, that they don't think that they know each other at all, that they don't understand why he was called in. But beyond all of that, their son and brother are dead, and they're not getting answers from the police in Wichita. They say that they haven't been able to get access to the body, to even view it, to say goodbye. They've asked why the police officer who shot is not being investigated. They want to know. They have a lot of questions for police and the city. Clearly, this is a double tragedy because a young man is dead. A police officer has shot somebody who wasn't armed, who wasn't even involved in this, who was completely innocent, it seems. And so it's a tragedy all around. The city of Wichita, the police there, and the government taking a go slow approach at the moment. Erica?
Miguel Marquez joining us live there from Los Angeles. Miguel, thank you. Also with us on the story, Tom Verney, former NYPD detective and a CNN law enforcement consultant. So, Tom, when we look at this, there is no denying the fact that there is an absolutely tragic outcome. Were police actions, from what you know of it and from what you've even heard in parts of that 911 call, do you believe they were justified here?
Good afternoon, Erica, and my condolences to the Finch family. And I also feel awful for the officer involved in this, because there are two tragedies here, right? You have, obviously, the certain tragedy of the innocent person that was killed, and then the tragedy of the officer that had to get involved in the middle of this scenario, which, they thought was happening in real time, but it was a completely false narrative, right? So, this psychopath, that started this whole thing. That's, if we're going to put blame, let's put the blame really where it chiefly belongs, which is with this maniac who phoned this in, who was, arrested and convicted for something similar to this already. A couple of years, did a couple of years in jail for this, by the way. So he clearly has a problem and belongs in jail to talk about those problems, because he's clearly a menace to society. And then you have the police who are responding. You and I have sat together how many times about all the crazy things that are going on in this country, right? Mass shootings and terrorist attacks and bombs and whatnot. And here you have someone who makes a 911 call who's claiming that he already killed someone. He's armed. He may set the house on fire. So the police are working under the premise that this is a real live event that they are walking into, especially during the holidays, during the onset of the new year, and they're going to be really at a heightened state of alert and when they approach this situation.
Well, and to your point, as we listened to, and we played only a portion of that, but that call went on for several minutes, and there were a lot of, I see details and quotes, because obviously we've learned now that the person was not at that home, obviously. So these things were, from what we know, were not happening there. How significant of an issue is this swatting, these fake 911 calls that could be made from somewhere across the country? How much more of an issue is that today for police officers than it was even a few years ago?
Yeah, there seems to be like a new, I hate to call it a fad, but it's kind of a new thing that's been happening, especially with a lot of these online gamers. It seems to be prevalent there, where they'll go and it's, to them, they think it's kind of like a crank call back in the day. You call someone and hang up. But the stakes here are much higher, because now you're looking to involve the authorities, making some sort of false allegations or some sort of danger where, listen, the police are going to come and do what they're trained to do, thinking, especially, like I said, in the world that we're living in, and we see this day in and day out, they're going to be responding to something just awful, where their safety is paramount. They're going to feel their safety is in jeopardy. They're going to try to help the people inside these premises. And then now they respond and then take their actions. At baseline, I believe the officer is justified in what he did. It's not nice what he did, in the sense of, the outcome is awful and tragic. But based on procedure, based on training, yes, I do believe he'll be justified in what he did. Listen, he's going to have to live the rest of his life knowing that he took someone else's life when there was no reason for that. And that's not an easy thing to do. So I would advocate for people to kind of try to put themselves in the shoes of an officer for a second and realize that that's not an easy thing either, really. So you have the Finch family. I feel awful for them, and the Wichita Police Department is a fine police department, and this is not something that happens there with any regularity. So this is going to be really hurtful for them.
No, two important points. And of course, we know there will be, an investigation. Obviously, they'll go through everything that happened. But there are a number of victims here, as you point out. When these calls are coming in nowadays, I mean, look, you can have a cell phone that has an area code that has nothing to do with where you live. Now that we can all keep our phone numbers, we can move all around the country. Is there any way for 911 operators to get a better sense of not only whether or not this is a prank call, but if the call is even coming from the area? Is that technology even in place at this point, do we know, to help officers differentiate and operators differentiate between a prank and a legitimate emergency call?
Yeah, well, and that's what's, chilling, right? When you hear this 911 call that you played a few minutes ago, and you listen, and you only played a portion of it, that phone call to me, if I was the operator, I would sound completely legitimate. And I'm going to relay that message. You have to remember, the 911 operator is relaying that message to a dispatcher. The dispatcher is working off the information from 911 and relaying that to the officers out on the street, out on patrol, as well as maybe any specialized units that may respond in a case like this. And so the information that they're getting is, first of all, very limited. And to the layman person, even to myself, that sounded like a real 911 call of someone who was disturbed, who's just committed an act of violence, who sounds armed. He's going to maybe commit arson on top of that by burning down the house. So the officers responding are going to be responding. They're coming full force because they want to thwart that threat as quickly as possible before anyone else gets injured or killed in their minds. And so, yeah, that's really difficult to do. In the case of where someone commits a crime and they're using a cell phone, and whether or not we can track the signal of that cell phone, yes. Then there are, between the tracking of the signals of the stations and whatnot, that could be done. But in the case of can they differentiate what's a real 911 call or not, I don't think that's a really tough one. Certainly not based on this 911 call.
Sure, it is tough. Tom Burney, always appreciate you joining us with your insight. Thank you.
Sure. Anytime. Thank you.